Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to some Antics. Hopefully, the daylight savings time over the weekend for Americans hasn't tripped y'all up too much with the timing. But happy Tuesday. It's great to be here. Great to be live with you all again. And today I am joined by Amit. Amit, how's it going?
I'm fine. How are you? Thank you for
I'm
having
doing.
me.
I'm doing great. I'm super excited to have had the chance to meet you. We've been kind of chatting in the green room apparently, green room before the stream, and you're just I don't know. You're a lovely person to chat with, and I'm
Thank
super
you.
super stoked to have you on.
Thank you. I'm
Wanted to call
excited to
out
be
some.
here as well.
My pleasure, my honor, really. We've got a question from the chat as to whether this will be available later for viewing on demand. Yes, the stream will stay up on Twitch for 2 weeks. Also, we're going to be uploading the video to YouTube after it's all captioned and everything. I've just put a link to that in the chat as well. So thank you so much for your uh, question there. Chan's complimenting on me on my shirt. I actually made like a private bet with myself on it that Michael Chan, Lunch Dev, was actually going to personally compliment me on my shirt specifically. I wish I were joking, and that happened within the first minute of being live. So here for it.
I missed it. So, but it is a great shirt.
Thank you, thank you. And we're being rated by Jason Langsdorff. Wow, way to go! Howdy, Boot Crew. Loved the remix talk. It's so good to have all of y'all here. If you're unfamiliar, Semantics is a weekly stream where I bring on guests from around the web development and web design industries to teach something in a hands-on way about building great user experiences for the web with a focus on accessibility and core web technologies. If you're here from Jason's stream, you're in the right place. We're so excited to have you. Today we've got Amit on. Amit, would you like to introduce yourself for folks who haven't seen you around?
Well, yeah. Hi, everybody. If you don't know me, my name is Amit Sheen. I'm a web developer. I specialize in CSS, specifically in animation and perspective and 3D. And maybe you've seen my work in CodePen or in Twitter or in one of the CSS relevant newsletters. Uh, Today, I am going to talk about something a bit different. We're going to talk about JavaScript because I am specializing in CSS, but I do work. My day job is as a JavaScript developer, React developer, and so this thing of being a JavaScript developer specializing in CSS, you when you know both things, you can actually see the synergy in both, and you can see a lot of solutions that you can use if you let each one of those languages just do what it does best. Um, that's me in general.
Absolutely. So on this subject of like, CSS and JavaScript, like JavaScript is absurdly powerful. And it feels like as time goes on, like the front end industry, the front end space is doing more and more to try to bring like CSS into like JavaScript land, layout into JavaScript land. But here you are advocating like, no, CSS is the way to do this. Like, can you kind of talk about like your approach, your philosophy as to like when you solve problems with one tool over another, and why is it important to still consider CSS for these tools?
Well, that is a great question. Actually, it's a nice intro to the things that I want to talk about later. Uh, but yeah, I do see a lot of people that try to say that like all this CSS and JS thing that JavaScript developers don't need to specialize to really know CSS, and that CSS developers don't really need to know JavaScript. I don't think so. I think that you need to know whatever you're doing, and think you know it. You should know it the best you can do, the best you can. Um, I do agree that there is a separation between what they call the front of the front end and the back of the front end, and I do think this separation is good and it should be, but it actually it doesn't contradict anything that I'm saying right now, because even if you are one person that does both the JavaScript and the CSS, you can still think of it as two different things, and let the JavaScript handle the functionality and let the CSS handle the layouts.
Good deal. So yeah, today we're gonna be diving into that. I guess should I go ahead and start sharing your screen and you can kind of talk us through what we're gonna be doing today?
Yeah, so I'm gonna start actually by talking about, we're gonna talk about the general concept is JavaScript problems, CSS solutions. So I just want to talk about the general where the general idea came from, the general idea
Okay.
for this topic. It actually came a few months ago when I've been in a local meetup, and there was a guy there talking about React. And do I share my screen? Do people show my screen?
There you go. Yes, your screen
Yeah,
is now shared.
yeah, so in his lecture, he built this very simple accordion component. We all know this accordion component. I built even a simpler one that he built. You click on an item, it opens. You click on it, a different one, the second one open. You click it again, it closes. And this is the way it built. You build it with React. We're gonna see the example that we're gonna see today is with React because, as I said, I am a React developer, and the component we're gonna see here are based on component that I've built in my real job. But the general idea, again, we're going to talk about CSS. So the general idea doesn't really matter if it's React, Vue, or plain JavaScript, or whatever it is. But again, this is the component. We have just a selected tab with a tab click. We have an accordion component. It's just an accordion div with the children, an accordion item that has a button as a header and a p as a paragraph as an item, and this is the markup. So uh, at his lecture, at the meetup that I've been here, he asked a question. He said that this is the behavior of the component, but if we only have one item, okay, we want this item to be always open. And the question was, how do we know if we have only one item or more? And it's a good question because this children comes as an array, as children, it's an opaque data structure. We can actually check the value of the length of it. And the solution that he was aiming for is this solution is actually using the children API, but you see there's a lot of code and you need to check the children API, and if it comes in a different way, you need to check it in a different way. But actually, before he even started it, before he explained all of this, when he asked how do we know if there's only one item or more, I raised my hand and I said, with CSS, and everybody started laughing. So I said, okay, I need to make people understand that they should actually stop laughing. And CSS is actually was the correct answer. So I just want to show that the example that he showed here, that using the children API, it will work if I delete two items right now, and I have only one item, so this item will always be open. Okay, but let's get back to my example that doesn't use this children, and all we need to do, instead of using this code, this use effect code, all we need is just one line of CSS, very performant, very readable CSS. We'll go here to the CSS. Oh, by the way, I haven't shown you. The CSS has an accordion item class with the item header inside and the item content with the height of 0, and it has the is open. So all we need to do is add right here, instead in front of the is open, to add an pseudo class of only child, and then this item will always be open. And if I have more than one item, so the behavior would be as usual. Oops. And if I have more than an item, then the behavior will be as usual. And if I have one item, then it will always be open. So this is just one simple example of how to save a lot of code that you should have that you would have written with JavaScript with just one line of JavaScript. And again, just as I said before, let JavaScript handle the functionality, let CSS handle the layout. And do you have any questions so far? By the way, I'm not following the chat. If there are questions from the chat.
There's just already some love for it. For instance, Kevin Powell says, "Love how simple CSS
Hey,
can make
Kevin.
things like that." ActiveBit goes, I absolutely agree. Techniques should focus on their main purpose. When they do, they help each other be more effective. It's great. It's
Yeah, so
excellent.
yeah, so actually, when I talk about this concept, people think that it's quite weird, uh, giving the CSS using the only child pseudo class. But if this concept looks weird to you, think about buttons. Okay, let's say I have a very simple button, and I want when the mouse is over the button, I want to change the style. So obviously, I will use the JavaScript on mouse enter and on mouse leave, right? No, this is how we used to do it like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but now we have the Hoover pseudo class, and everybody's gonna use the Hoover pseudo class. So, and there's a lot of pseudo class, by the way, and this is we all know the user action pseudo class, the Hoover active, but there's the tree structural user class of like the nth child and the only child, and we can actually use them to control the layout and to let the CSS control the layout and to save a lot of code for, using JavaScript. So do you have any more questions, or we can go to the next example?
I don't have any questions. Just to call out too that like I one of the things I love about CSS and in HTML is that like it's fail safe. So if something goes wrong, your page isn't fundamentally broken. Whereas
Yeah,
JavaScript, if you run into a null pointer error while trying to do this kind of toggling, right? Your page can just absolutely break. So not only is
this
it
is
like fewer lines of code, it's more resilient code.
yeah, no doubt. This is actually another advantage of using CSS. And again, this is just a side effect of letting CSS do what CSS is supposed to do and letting JavaScript do what it's supposed to do.
Mhm.
And it's just easier. And the easier solution is normally the better one or the more correct one. More
Absolutely.
correct. Um, So let's see another example. And this is we're going to use a different pseudo element. This is a very simple dialogue element. Um, this is the dialogue we have. Wait a minute. Yep. Yeah. This is the dialogue. We have the dialogue component with the H1, H2, and the footer. The footer has the buttons inside of it. But we're not going to talk about dialogue. We're just going to talk about the footer itself. Let's see. We have here the outline just to see the footer. Just going to talk about the. Why doesn't it work? Yeah, just going to talk about the footer itself. So the footer is, as I said, it's dynamic and it has two buttons inside of it, because the dialog gets its prop, gets its approved prop and a cancel prop, and if you get any prop, you can render a button with the prop, with the relative props. And as I said, it's dynamic. So if I'll comment out one button, so I will have only one button here. And if I'll comment the other button, so obviously I will have the other button. But the question is, what happened if I comment both of them out? So now I won't see any buttons, but I will see the component itself. Okay, if we'll add the outline again, we will see the component itself.
Hmm.
So, but we don't want to see the component. If the component is empty, we don't want to render it. So how do we do it? So obviously, every JavaScript developer will tell you, okay, we're going to add a condition right here, and if one of them is rendered, then render it. If not, so no. Okay, but that's okay if you have two buttons. But what happens if you have three or six or an unknown number of buttons? What if
Mm.
instead of a footer, it's a menu and it's like an array of elements that you need to run through? You don't really use it. How do you not render an element when it's empty? Easy, CSS. We'll go back here to the CSS, and right here this is the dialog, this is the footer, and the footer let's just add an empty. Oops, sorry, empty. And if it's empty, we can add a display none, for example. And right now, that's it. It's gone. And if we do have a component inside of it, if we do have a button inside of it, it's going to render. And it doesn't matter if it has originally has 3 or 200 buttons. Once the second this dialog is empty, the footer is empty, it won't render. And I know it doesn't, it's not really best practice to render something to the page and then remove it from the page. It's correct. But sometimes by the way, this type of solution doesn't work 100% of the times, obviously, but when it does work, sometimes it makes more sense to do it like that and not starting all these ifs and conditions and complicating your code. And by the way,
Absolutely.
it doesn't have to be display none. You can, instead of display none, just remove the border. Let's say border none. Um, so now you don't have a border, or you can actually just say padding 0, which will actually looks kind of okay. And again, the second I will bring one of the button backs, all of the style is going back to the original style. And again, this is very by simply using a pseudo class. One more example that I want to show is using a list. Okay. I'm running through the example because I thought that people will have more questions. If you
Yeah,
do
if
have
y'all have
questions,
any
chat.
questions, please go ahead and put them in the
Yeah,
chat, and we'll
if
get to
not, if not, I have more example. It's okay. We mostly don't. Okay, so this is just a list component. Originally, it was something else, but this is a user list. And normally, in these types of components, we're going to get the list from a fetch. But here I have the user data hard coded, but I'm going to leave it like this. And all I'm doing is just I'm mapping the users from the user data. I'm mapping it to divs, and this is what it is. And what our designer wants is that this list, one item is going to be in the line to the left, then to the right, and then they want him to alternate it. And actually, the developer that did this mission wasn't me; it was a different guy, and he obviously used here. He put the user. He actually used this the index, and he just added right here. If the index modulo of 2 equals to 0, then add left. If not, add the class of right, and he just added 2 more classes, obviously. And in the CSS, he added 2 more classes. And I said, no, why do you want to add those classes? You don't need to. So instead, we can come over here. This is the CSS, obviously. This is the user. Right here in the user, instead of adding left and right classes, we can use the nth child. We all know the nth child, but not everybody knows we can actually add odd. So if we're gonna add odd, we can add a line self, I think, flex start, and then everything is gonna be, let's move it to 5. Would be to the start, and just like we added odd, we can actually add even, and this is gonna be flex end. So now we have the alternating design. And why I think this is better than using classes, because this way if for example, let's say I want this design to be just on desktop, and if you move to a smaller screens, I want it to be again in the middle. So all I need to do is just add a media here. Let's say that the media is let's say, oops, sorry, let's say min width 600 pixels. So I just need to move those inside the media. And now if I have in bigger screens, I have the design. In smaller screen, they will move back to the middle. And the change in the layout doesn't reflect any change in the markup, and that's the way it's supposed to be. This is a great tweet by Bramus that I think that if you don't know it, go follow him. He says, repeat after me: a change in layout should not require a change in markup. And it's absolutely true. And if you have a chance of leaving the markup as is and changing the layout using CSS. Let CSS control the layout, and don't use any and don't use any markup changes if you want to change the layout.
Hmm.
And one great example of that, and we actually talked about it in the green room before. The best example maybe for it is Style Stage. I saw Steph in the chat. So obviously, if you don't know Style Stage, stop and go and check Style Stage, and it's a beautiful experiment. And all the sites that you see here, that they all look very, very, very different from one another. And here, this one's mine. And they all look very different. They all have the exact same HTML. The only thing that difference is only CSS, no JavaScript, nothing, only CSS. So it's a beautiful thing to see how much power CSS actually have today when it comes to controlling layout, not just controlling colors and font sizes, actually controlling the layout itself. If you have a good structural HTML.
Can we pop a few of those open just to take a look and really like hit that example home for people?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, let's take. There's one thing I do want to show. Let's take this one, and this one, and check out just the navigation. Okay, so here it's in the middle. Of course, take a look at the entire site. The entire everything looks very different. Those three sites are actually have the exact same HTML. But even look at the nav bar. Here it's over here, and here it's in the middle, and here it's in the top, and you can actually change, and you can actually look at some examples. Like I think this one.
Okay, I'm gonna real quickly give a motion warning for this one. I think
Uh
we're gonna get some like zoom choppiness, but like that one I know needs like a bit of a motion warning for anyone who's not great with like flashing animations.
yeah, sorry. So yeah, you're right. So this one actually has a lot of flashing, but you can see here that the nav bar is even in the right, and it's
Mhm.
fixed in the right, or it's actually I think it's not fixed. It's absolute, not absolute, sticky, sticky.
And
Yeah. So there's
it's
a lot of
worth
great examples.
it's worth calling out. Like when you say the markup's the same, you don't just mean like, oh, it's the same like elements and everything. Like even down to the classes and the selectors, like the markup is identical. The only difference basically is that it's pulling in a different style sheet, right? Like
Yeah,
so
and this is the whole idea of style sheet. You get this is your HTML file. You can't add JavaScript. You can't add anything. Just write CSS. And I remember actually talking with Steph when it came out, and I actually asked her, "Isn't it like detached from real life?" I remember asking her that question, and she said, "But no, because you need to know it. You need to understand the power of CSS." And well, yeah, this is the way to understand this the power that CSS has. And again, as I said, a lot of as a JavaScript developer, I see a lot of those problems, and just learn better, learn how to use your CSS, and let CSS control the layout, and you can actually save yourself a lot of problems
mhm.
in the future. Yeah,
So I have a question for you, which is,
yeah.
and you can let me know if this isn't the right time for it, but when would you think of things in the inverse way? Like when does it make more sense to handle some of these things with JavaScript? Like what are kind of the boundaries of what you think is reasonable to do with CSS?
Yeah, so that is actually a very good question, and I actually know I know somebody that likes to push the limits of CSS, um, but there is no like a very clear rule of thumb. But if you have two solutions in your head, one goes to CSS, one goes to JavaScript, the simplest solution is the one that you should choose. Um, the one that has less, maybe less code, but the one that is more readable, the one that is more easy to maintain. So again, sometimes using CSS, it's not the easiest to maintain, specifically if you're working with teams that maybe those teams involve some full stack developers. or people that doesn't really know all the specific thing that you do with CSS. I'm going to give you actually one example. One company I've talked to recently wanted to start using logical properties. And I said, well, of course, you should obviously use logical properties and not use just JavaScript to transfer everything. Um, but the problem they said is that most of the people that handle their code doesn't understand the concept of logical property. That's what stopped them until now. They needed actually somebody to teach their developers what logical property even means and what the box model even means before they could actually start doing it. So until they could do it, they worked with JavaScript. So yes, sometimes JavaScript is a better solution, obviously, but sometimes no. Again, if it's a rule, if it's a something that is layout related, try solving it with CSS. If it's not the easiest solution, go to JavaScript.
I I also think about this in terms of things like animations, because when you do your animations in CSS land, they're oftentimes easier for individuals to override. For instance, if they have like just if they get dizzy with motion, right? It's easier to disable a CSS animation. Sometimes JavaScript animations aren't always built with that kind of overrideability in them. And so that's something that I guess I would consider like CSS first if at all possible.
But I think that today you can actually start CSS animations pretty easily. But yeah, JavaScript animations, specifically if you use libraries like Lottie or something, that they know
Mhm.
how to stop when they have the reduce motion flag on.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Um, did you have more examples you wanted to kind of show
Yeah,
off
there
and
is,
talk through?
there is. We talked about pseudo classes, but what about pseudo elements? Obviously, before and after. This is the most important thing. And seriously, I don't know how people don't use before and after more. I see it as the superpowers of divs. Uh, Specifically when it comes to styling, because it makes every div you have like three boxes and you can add everything you have, everything you want. If you want like a weird border, just use a pseudo element. So here we're gonna use this example of the user list, but we're gonna use it the pseudo elements a bit weird. Um, so actually here, instead of mapping the user data, let's map an empty array. So now I don't have nothing. So this is I'm simulating getting an empty result, okay? But I don't want to show nothing. I want to show a message that I have no result, right? So again, normally you're going to start using CSS, using JavaScript, and start checking the length, and if it's like this, render this, and if this, render that, and so on. Instead, let's again go back to CSS. Right here in the list itself, we're going to add something that we've seen before. We're going to add the empty, but then we're going to add the after. And the after element, pseudo element, gets a nice little content property. And in the content, we can say, let's say, no results. And yeah, so now we can see it here, and we can actually style it. We can say that the color is red, and we can say that the border is 1 pixel solid, and let's have a background, and let's have a padding of 1 em, 3 em, just so we can see it. I just want to show that you can actually style it any way you want. And again, if we can come here and if we do have a results, so we can have we will see the results. And the second we don't have results, uh, So, oops. Yeah, the second we don't have results, so it's automatically going to show us the no results sign. And I know, but some of you actually thinking, and you are right, I'm not going to use it because I'm not going to use content that is hard coded inside my CSS. Obviously, you shouldn't do it, but because this is really not good practice. But you can actually come here to the list itself, and you can add the text as a prop. So let's say like no res, and let's say blah blah blah. Uh, okay, so now we can actually come to the CSS, and the props. Obviously, there are like attributes, so we can use inside the content. Uh, we can use the attribute of no res, and now I have the text that is coming right here from the no res. So or if you're using like a translation library, or if you're using dynamic content, so yeah, you can transfer the content dynamically from the JavaScript to the CSS, and when I
You're
change it, it
That
will
works
change it.
because you're spreading that on the underlying li element, right? Like if you scroll down to your list component.
Yeah, obviously here
Yeah, okay.
I am
That's
spreading it.
I was initially very surprised, but okay, it's because you're spreading the props on that underlying div. Got it. Got it.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I actually I forgot to mention it. Yeah, obviously it will work only if you spread the props. But yeah, so and you can actually see it if you want to. Uh, Here in the list, you can actually see uh, that this is the no res. You can the attribute right here.
Very cool.
And by the way, this is here in the dialogue. This method of adding the content, this is the way I use it to add the content buttons. You can see the buttons has a before, and a before has the attribute of the content, because here it comes in the content. And while we're here, the last thing I actually want to show is obviously in the original component, I also have an on action click on click action, and this I have a button component that maps the theme into classes. But here I didn't have a button component. I use a native button, so I actually triggered. I actually uh, used the the prop itself, the theme itself, to find to style the button. You can actually use a prop again, because I'm spreading the props here. You can actually use a prop to select a specific div, a specific element.
Very neat. We have a question in the chat from ActiveBit who wants to know: do we know how well screen readers handle text in CSS pseudo element content? Do you want to take this, or should I?
I think you're much more suitable for this answer.
Okay. So pseudo elements actually are factored into the what's called the accessible name computation for an element. The accessible name being the like identifier, the label, the title, name, whatever you want to call it, for an element once you navigate to it with a screen reader. So pseudo elements are supposed to be factored into that calculation. And uh, I think that can be more reliable when you're using interactive elements like buttons. So, like if you add a pseudo element to a button, but I'm pretty sure it should factor into things like divs as well. And I can actually put a blog post that I've got in the chat. Nice. Where I actually talk about exactly that. But what you're gonna want to look for, ActiveBit, is specifically WCAG's quote, accessible name and description computation formula or algorithm or something like that. It should be factored in. Whether or not it's actually factored in, I think kind of depends a lot on the individual browser and assistive technology. But I think at this point, it's reasonably stable. It's not a technique I would necessarily rely on very often, but it
I
should
agree.
work most of the time.
Yeah, so I agree, and this is by the way, this is something that I do need to mention maybe a bit more. This type of solutions obviously doesn't work all the time. I'm not saying every time that you need to do something, do it with CSS. Again, use your head, find out what is the best way. I am saying this is one way that you should. This is one way that you should consider, and not cancel it out just because it's CSS. Again, just like we talked earlier about the buttons. If you want to use a hover pseudo elements, you won't use JavaScript on enter on leave. You're gonna use the pseudo elements. So use the other pseudo elements, and yeah, go to MDN and learn, because there's a lot of pseudo elements. Every time I go into this page, it's in my favorites, and every time I go to this page, I find a new one. By the way,
Yeah, I think I just saw for
uh,
like the link and any link ones at the top. I don't think it quite clicked for me that the link one only matched unvisited links. That's really cool. Um, yeah, local
yeah,
link. Wow, wow. Wait, local link has been there the whole time. How long has that been there? Here I am,
you
like, oh,
see,
I've been doing this stuff with like fancy attribute selectors with like operators, like like the caret equals for like starts with. Oh, okay, who knows?
no specification found. Yeah, it does. It doesn't. The support's not as good, I think.
Yeah, okay, all right. Um,
We can check.
oh, okay. The link ones are not really supported. Steph says, got it. Thank you, Steph.
Yeah, but there is a lot of different pseudo classes, so go and check them out. And obviously, there's also different types of pseudo elements. But before and after, those are the pseudo elements that most of us use. But there is a few more.
Very cool. Yeah. So pseudo classes, pseudo classes, pseudo elements. Those tend to be kind of. It seems like some really powerful tools in your toolkit. Um, Using attributes for some of these things as well is huge. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I think that the main takeaway is that you actually, first of all, again, start considering CSS as a valid solution. But anyway, build a strong semantic structural markup, because it will help you control your layout later on, and it's better for a lot of reasons, but one of it is going to help you control your layout, and use more before and after, because they do make you they do make you super powers. Has Amit made Sudoku with pseudo elements? Are you daring me, Alex?
I think you've been dared.
I
I think you
think you've
gotta
been
make it
there.
now. Okay. Well, we actually have a bit of time.
Yeah,
And while we're here, do you want to show off some of the very cool things you've made to like push the limits of what CSS can do?
yeah. If you are talking about things I'm doing well, let's go to my code then. I think that's the best place to show. So yeah, people that normally knows me for things like this one. Yeah, this is pure CSS animations. And this is the types of things I do, and I like to, as I said, push the CSS to the limit. Specifically, I actually started doing animations um, just as a way to test things, because instead of checking one value, you can actually test a lot of value. You can taste a range of values, and you start using animations, things start to look nice, and you can and start building from there. And I'm doing animations a lot. I'm doing with I'm also doing working with Canvas and with 3JS and things like that. But I'm known for the things I'm doing with
Mhm.
CSS. Um, I actually have a workshop now. If you don't mind me plugging it,
Oh yeah.
about it actually called pushing CSS to the limit. It's a workshop I'm doing with Smashing Magazine. It's a 4 days full of CSS animations and movement and 3D and perspective and everything. Yeah, this is the link in the chat. Thank you. Yeah, so if you are interested in going into this world and creating, and by the way, in this workshop I am focusing more in like real life. I'm trying to focusing on more real life components like checkboxes and info cards and the radio buttons
Mhm.
and inputs and titles and headlines and text boxes and so on, but things that you can use interaction and micro interactions with 3D, things that you can actually use in day to day and not just weird, you know, car towers. Um, yeah, you do know CSS. I just know different parts of CSS. I'm talking about building bedrock layouts. Um, yeah, I just don't know different parts of CSS, and you can learn it also. It's not very hard. It's not. Travis, hi Travis. Yeah. That's it.
Okay.
If the guys from the chat has more questions about the both the JavaScript and or 3D anything, yeah, we do have more time. We finished earlier than I thought because I actually planned one more example, but I didn't have enough time to prepare it in advance. I'm sorry.
Totally understand how that is. I've definitely been on kind of the receiving end on the guesting end of streams, and it's like, oh man, if I had like all the time in the world, I would have come up with like 2 or 3 more demos and would have done this and this and this, and it just doesn't happen. Yeah, so chat again, if you've got any questions, now's a great time to ask them. Otherwise, we might start wrapping up early, but I figure there's got to be at least a question or two. Um, where do you? I guess one. Oh yeah. I guess Travis wants to know how are you doing accessibility for something like the ping pong table? Like what considerations do you have in mind for that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Actually, so when I'm doing animations like the ping pong table, I'm not thinking accessibility because first of all, there's nothing to be accessible. It can't be really accessible, and it's not. It's just a proof of concept. It's not really an item. But here, for example, this is a checkbox I made. Let's make it a bit bigger, and it's a regular checkbox. But when you click it, it flips. Like it jumps, and
Love that.
this is 100% accessible. So it has a tab, and it has keyboard navigations, and you can check it with screen readers. It's absolutely accessible. I've checked it a couple of times. So when you are working with animation, 3D animations, it's definitely not a reason to give up accessibility. But when I'm creating 3D animations like the ping pong table, I don't think about accessibility because
It's just not.
specifically it's just not relevant. It's
It's
not what I'm supposed to show.
it's not what the demo's for. Totally.
Yeah, it's not what demo is for. But again, when I am doing buttons and info cards and things like that, I'm trying to think about accessibility. I'm trying to think about keyboard navigation and screen readers. And by the way, here specifically, I don't have reduced motion. I don't reduce motion, but normally you should also use reduced motion. The media query for reduced motion.
deal. That
and
was
and this is by the way the rule of thumb when you are working with animations Three rules of thumb. Uh, One is don't hide content, because sometimes you have a lot of divs. Like here we have 6 divs, so don't hide content. The second rule is use don't forget keyboard navigations, and the third is, I said, don't use animations. Use preferred reduce motion.
Absolutely. Travis, that was a great question. Thank you. Yeah, this has been excellent, and you've got some kudos in the chat. Like ActiveBit says that the examples you provided were very clear. So, um,
Thank you. And by the way, if anybody wants to check out those examples, or if you have questions about it, so the best place to get me is on Twitter. Um, and yeah, I like to talk about front end. So uh, yeah, just hit me up on Twitter and talk about anything that's relevant or not relevant.
absolutely, and I'm gonna put a link to your website in here as well. Yeah, so I think let's go ahead and I guess start wrapping this up. Amit, thank you so much for your time. This has been
Thank
just
you.
fantastic. These lovely demos. I really want to compliment you on your demos. You've done a great job curating those. Um,
Thank you.
for us. So I want to thank you for your time. I put a link to your Twitter and your website and your code pen all in the chat. So y'all, if you're interested in any of this kind of stuff and how Amit is using CSS to just create delightful experiences and solve problems of design, please go check those resources out. Go follow Amit. Um, and I I think you should absolutely take his workshop. I think if any of the stuff that you've seen today is appealing to you, you should go check out his Smashing workshop. And I'm sure you're gonna learn a lot there. Also, if you're into accessibility and core web technology streams on the regular, follow Semantics here on Twitch. We actually have a
Follow semantics.
thank you, thank you, thank you. We actually have a stream this Thursday at 4 p.m. Central. The tweet just went live for that a couple minutes ago. But Larry Hudson is going to be coming on to talk about document accessibility. So, how do you make PDFs accessible? That's something that I have zero experience in. But he's promised that it's going to feature some 11D, which is a subject that, as many folks here would know, is near and dear to my heart. So, I'm super excited for that. Let me actually get a link to that in the chat as well. There's a calendar link there, so add that to your calendar. Additionally, next Tuesday, I will be live at 1 p.m. Central. I'm bringing on Patrick Hulsey on. He Patrick is the creator of the Lighthouse CI tool. He used to work for Google. He built the Lighthouse CI tool, and he'll be talking about debugging web performance. So I hope to see y'all there as well. Um,
I'm gonna be there.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. And chat, stick around. I'm gonna find someone to raid. I'm sure there's someone else live. Amit, again, thank you so much for your time. Chat, thank
Thank
you
you
for
for
being here.
having me.
See y'all on Thursday. Bye y'all.